Here we go.
Great.
All right.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to Iowa City Noon Rotary. It's great to see your smiling faces every Thursday. I am your president this year, Eric Weiler. We start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone could please unmute yourself, and we're going to put a slide up of the American flag. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic
for
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. We are going to try, for those of you who joined us early, the breakout rooms to try to simulate what a small table conversation would be like if we were back in person. So just watch for that the next couple of weeks. If you log in and wonder where everyone is at, we're going to divide everyone in breakout rooms for some small group discussions. So now we're going to go for over to Devin for Zoom tips. Devin.
Hey, good to see you all. I will lead with the typical view thing. You can check out hopefully in the top right-hand corner if you're on a computer or somewhere there's a little grid or a little thing that looks like a film or a film camera. You can change from speaker to gallery, use that speaker view if you really want to see who's talking, and then gallery view if you want to see the reactions of everybody else who's listening to the person who's talking, which is most enjoyable, and especially at the beginning and the end of the most enjoyable meeting. And I will also say that if you could mute your microphones throughout the meeting, that'll help us keep from getting feedback loops. Definitely unmute if you're talking, but if there's feedback, I will hunt you down and ruthlessly mute you. So don't worry about it. I'll get you taken care of if something happens. Go to the participants tab to see who else is here. Go to the chat tab to sign in for attendance purposes. And then the reactions tab has a raise hand and a whole bunch of fun little emojis, including the best emoji of all, the saxophone emoji. Back to you, President Eric.
Great, yeah, thank you, Devin. So now is a great opportunity for all of us to test our Zoom skills. If you're a visiting Rotarian, a Rotarian with a guest, or if you're a visitor today, please click raise hand. We'd like to call on you to unmute yourself and introduce you, and we can welcome you. So I know I saw some new faces on here, so don't be shy. Just click raise hand, and we'd love to be able to welcome you. No takers. Well, welcome to everyone.
Eric,
oh, sorry, Devin.
Kate Torno signed in the chat. She's a visitor. Kate, do you want to say anything?
Hi, Gary Klein told us about this, and so I popped in. I work at the University of Iowa. Good to see you all. You guys are really neat. I'm enjoying your vibe. Thanks for having us.
Great, well, welcome, Kate. So if anyone has an announcement, please click a raise hand and we'll call on you. And wanted to let everyone know, last week we celebrated and honored the life of Rotarian Herb Wilson. And Herb's service information, it is going to be on February 26th at St. Andrew Presbyterian Church in Iowa City. The family is doing visitation from noon until 3 p.m. that Saturday afternoon. The celebration of Herb's life will be at 3 o'clock. And then there'll be a reception to follow. So February 26th at St. Andrew Presbyterian Church, if you want to go and recognize Herb. So Vern, you've got an announcement for us.
I do. Thanks, President Eric. What I was wanting to mention to you is I serve on the golf committee for the Ronald McDonald House fundraiser. And that is going to be scheduled for June 6th of this coming year if things stay normal. We had it last year, but it was pretty well cut down. And this year we're going to go full out and try and fill up our foursomes again. We'd like to have 2 foursomes on every hole. So what I really specifically need is a couple people that are not afraid to call people, or businesses really, or people with a business, to ask for sponsorships. And I serve on that particular committee. And Doug Parson also helps me, but I need 2 more. So if 2 of you people would like to volunteer, and we'll give you a list of who to call, and then what we want to do is raise the money through the sponsorships, a major part of the, the thing that we give to the, to the Ronald McDonald House. There are other ways too, and we'll cover those as we go along, but please volunteer if you would, please. And you can just reach me at my telephone or my email. It's vern@vernfolkman.com. Thank you.
Vern, thank you for the leadership of that committee, and for our new members and guests. Rotary, we're really passionate about giving back to the community, and Ronald McDonald House is one of the areas we support with an annual golf outing. And lifetime funds raised, we are approaching $1 million over the years that we've raised. So making a big impact for Ronald McDonald House, their guests in our community. So Ryan Bell, Ryan, you've got an announcement?
Yes, I do. Thank you, President Eric. I would like to cordially invite all of you to participate in the All Iowa District Conference. What is that, you ask? It's the first of its kind, where both our district and the district just north of us, 5970, that could be wrong. The number doesn't matter. But we're going to all party together, learn about Rotary, and it all takes place right here in our backyard at the Coralville Hyatt Regency, formerly the Marriott. And that is in April 22nd and 23rd. And I'm going to put in the link, or in the chat box here, the link to go register. The online registration has not opened yet, but will soon. There is a paper form registration you can take advantage of now. But we would love to, really, show a great participation there. Be an awesome way to connect with a lot of different Rotarians, learn what they're doing in their clubs, and, just kind of embrace the whole act of getting together and having some fellowship. So April 22nd, 23rd, mark your calendar and get registered. Thanks, Eric.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And as Ryan mentioned, we're going to see Rotarians from all over the state converging on the Iowa City area, and great opportunity to meet other Rotarians and to see and learn what other Rotary clubs are doing. So hope you will consider joining us at the conference in April. Missy Forbes, Missy, you have an announcement?
Thanks, President Eric. I made the announcement last week, but just as a reminder, our Rotary District received a $10,000 grant from Save the Children, and our Rotary, along with the Iowa City AM Rotary, are going to tap into some of these funds to support early literacy in our community. We are focusing on the 0 to 5 age group, obviously, for early literacy. And I believe we are going to potentially partner with Open Heartland to have some multicultural, multi-generational interactions. So Ray Mustin and I are going to attend the Rotary Reading Summit on February 19th, and we'll have more information coming down the info pipeline later on or in the future, but looking forward to digging into that and keep you guys posted on our progress.
Great. Yeah, Missy, thank you. Thank you and Ray for helping on this committee and this outreach. And Missy, if I remember, you're doing a Rotary program on your 4Cs organization in a few weeks. So that'll definitely be one we're excited to hear.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Joe Hughes. Joe, you have an announcement?
Thanks, President Eric. Sorry for showing up late. I think I missed the opportunity to introduce my new guests. So maybe they were mentioned already, but Brad gave me the heads up that I had missed out on that. So Ruth Field and Jeff Field. I met Ruth at the our golf outing, the For the House golf outing, as we were all volunteering there last summer, and they were super delightful and looking for ways to volunteer, get involved, all of that. So I think they'll be great to have around here. So welcome, Ruth and Jeff.
Great. Joe, thank you for inviting them, and Jeff and Ruth, welcome. So final announcements I have: if you're looking for ways to get more involved with Rotary, we do have a few committees that we need some extra hands with. Our grants committee, we have an opportunity every year to get a $5,000 grant from the Rotary District that we match dollar for dollar. So it's a grant of up to $10,000 to impact our community. We're looking to add another 1 or 2 people to that committee to help promote the process and to help us find a great project in the community to pursue. Also, our membership committee, we need a few new folks to help us not just recruit new members, but make sure we're retaining the current members we have. Reaching out to some of the folks that we haven't seen for a while to invite them to come back. And also Sergeant at Arms Committee, when we're able to return again in person at the Highlander, we need to recruit a small committee of folks every week to arrive about probably 20 to 25 minutes early to set up our registration table and our name tag. And as an incentive for that committee, for the Sergeant at Arms, whoever does a setup that week, we will provide a free lunch for. So as a small way we can thank them for their help. And finally, our Rotary board met earlier this week. We were really excited and hoping to get back in person in February, but just with the COVID numbers and everything increasing, we don't think it's unfortunately the right time right now. So we are going to be 100% virtual on Zoom in February, with the hopes that things will improve and we can get back in person in the Highlander in March. So we will be on Zoom through the end of February. So with that, we are on, Patty McCarthy, we'll get you in here, Patty.
You know, you saying that, Eric, I want to say thank you to you and all of the people on the board for keeping us as safe as a community and as a club. And just know, I know it's a hard decision, but thank you.
Yep, thank you for saying that, Patty. And if you're wondering about the other clubs, there's 4 clubs in Iowa City, and 3 of the 4 are like us. They're 100% virtual. The one that is meeting in person right now is the Corvo North Corridor Club, and they were a small group, maybe 10 to 12 folks meeting. So the Rotary you love is still there. We will get back in person. It's just taking, unfortunately, a little longer than we had hoped. So with that, we're on to our program. We've got a wonderful speaker today we're excited to hear from. And I would like to introduce Rotarian Tom Cook to introduce our speaker today. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, President Eric. Steve Semken is the primary and driving force behind Ice Cube Press and the Tall Corn Books imprint in North Liberty. Since 1990, Steve has authored 6 books, edited 3 others, been included in 4 anthologies, and was picked as a writer in residence at the Island Institute at Sitka, Alaska. Sounds like a pretty good gig. The Ice Cube Press has worked with and been recognized by a host of literary organizations. I'll mention just a few. Humanities Iowa, the Iowa Arts Council, literally every major newspaper in the Midwest, Publishers Weekly, Bloomsbury Review, New York Daily News, Los Angeles Review of Books, Chicago Tribune, Iowa Public Radio, Iowa City Book Festival, UNESCO City of Literature, and as I said, many others. As an author, salesman, publisher, and motivated entrepreneur, Steve is a publisher that authors and bookstores trust. I can personally vouch for the fact that Steve goes out of his way to guide first-time authors through the murky waters of publishing their first book. He literally does it all, and it is my pleasure to introduce Steve. Whoa, Steve, you're muted, I think. We're not hearing you.
Still no luck, Steve. Nope.
He was in my small group earlier. We could hear him just fine, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure what it is.
We had checked it out earlier too. Oh,
He's going to log off and log back on.
okay.
Maybe it's his headphones.
Let me just fill in a little bit here.
Oh,
You know,
oh,
I just reset the whole thing. So is it?
oh, there you go.
Okay, good. Yeah, who knows what happens. All right. Well, thanks for that intro, Tom. I heard that, so don't worry. Even though you couldn't hear me, I could hear you just fine. It's when I hear people talk about what I've done, it all happens so slowly that you don't really recognize what's going on along the way. It's a little bit. I'm not really much of a speaker. I think that the whole point of being a publisher is listening and working behind the scenes. And so I was kind of encouraged by a lot of people. You should celebrate the 30 years of being in business. And I think that's kind of fun to do. So it's given me a chance to sort of look at where I've come from. And most importantly, sort of look at what could happen next. And if I were all of you, I know I recognize some of you, but I think I'd just tell you a little bit about why I started and where I started. And along the way, I think it's useful to think of this guy started in 1990 along the Kansas River or Kaw River in Lawrence, Kansas. And that was mostly this person you see now. I just wanted to be a writer. I didn't think about publishing. I was just out there. And so I think it's kind of strange that this creative writer has started a business, because I was jumping around trying a new business probably every 3 to 4 weeks for years. I mean, I was a VW mechanic. I was a house restorer down on the Lake of the Ozarks. I was packing fish. I was just jumping around, doing one thing after another in between jobs that I had. And the fact that this thing called the Ice Cube Press is still around is kind of fascinating to me, because I really, honest to God, had no idea that I would still be doing this. And to prove that, the way I came up with the name, which is a very popular question of me, is how did I come up with the name Ice Cube Press? I was writing a story, I don't know, in the late 80s, and I had this guy. You know how you're driving down the highway and it's a nice sunny day and you keep seeing those mirages out in the distance, and you go over the hill, and every once in a while, at least if you're me, you always think, man, maybe someday I'll catch up with one of those. Granted, that's impossible, but it still goes through your brain. And so lo and behold, in my story, I did get into one of those mirages. And when I got inside, I looked around and there was the Ice Cube Cafe. And the story just took off from there. But the next day, like I told you, because I was starting a new idea every few weeks, I just thought, I'll call this thing the Ice Cube Press. And in my mind, I thought, if everyone says, oh, that sounds kind of cool, I thought, well, then the name is just fine, because it's just not going to last. I mean, I wasn't super confident. Since then, I've had various explanations given to me on why I came up with that name. The one I like the best, and honestly the one I wish I'd thought of at the time, is that I was doing a reading or an event and someone said, I really like how you took water and you turned it into ice, because water can transform from liquid to solid and changes shapes. And I was like, that's exactly why I came up with that name. It's so good. But in some ways, that is kind of what I aim to do. Is one of my goals is to better understand how we can best live in the Midwest, and I think that involves a lot of different viewpoints. I mean, the whole publishing project for me is just kind of like a sculpture or something. You're going around and around, looking at all these infinite ways that you can understand the world where we live. Anyway, that's how I started. And most people want to know where you're from, so I'll tell you where I'm from. I grew up in Iowa City from the age 2 until I graduated from the University of Iowa in 1987. Along the way, I went to various schools that are closed now, and it's not because of me that these schools closed, I promise. Like, I started out at University Elementary over at North Hall, and I was there until they shut down. But I swear, me leaving my lunches and harassing the teachers didn't cause the place to go out of business. And then from there, I went to Shimmick, and they're still around, so I didn't mess that one up. And then I went to Central Junior High, and yes, I understand that one's gone too, but it was a good place to go to school. And I went on through the University of Iowa, and kind of like I was looking for a purpose in life, I'd never really settled on a great major or anything. I ended up with a degree in history and English because I liked reading, and I liked finding out about the events that were going on at the time of the novels that I was reading in my English classes. And as most people will still probably tell you, those don't always lead to great jobs. In my case, it was a slow motion transition from history and English into what I would eventually do later. From there I ended up living in Michigan and Oregon and Kansas, and like I said, I started this press idea in 1990-91. I know I started in a rainy day in early fall in 91. I went up and dropped my first newsletter, which was called New Native Americans, or Sycamore Roots, New Native Americans, into the mailbox. And there it was. I shared that book. I shared my ideas and my idea of a business with 100 people. I continued with this idea of this newsletter till 1996. And why is that important in my life? That was the MFA in writing that I never had, but I consider that my real life MFA program, is doing this really short 16-page, I guess now you'd call it I can't think of what you call it, just like a zine. And I guess that's what it was. But I used it as a way to introduce myself to people that were writing while living authors. I think that's something that, at least when I was first as an English major, I didn't understand that there are living authors out amongst us. I mean, it's hard to imagine being a publisher because there's very few role models for that in the world. Even being a publisher now, I rarely meet another one. So there's not a lot of communication between how we do what we do. But I just started sending letters to authors that I really admired and asking them if they'd submit, asking them for $5 to subscribe to this publication I had. And the authors themselves aren't really important. I mean, if you know them, like my first subscriber was Gary Schneider, who's a prize-winning author, and I'd known about him from some on the road 50s Dharma Bums books back, written by the Beat Poets. And so when I got that from him, I thought I must be on the right track. And so I just sort of used that as a way to build my confidence. And there's no way to underestimate that. I mean, it was motivating for me as a person, and it definitely reflected back that I was doing something that even though I didn't know if it would work, I knew that it was a good idea. I did the very first book in 1996, and it was one that I wrote called River Tips and Tree Trunks. And there's a little bit of, what's the word, not looked upon greatly, which is a bad way to phrase the word I'm looking for, but just self-publishing your own work. And when people said that or say that, I'm like, William Blake published himself. And so I'm happy to be in that company. And on the other hand, people like Tom Cook would be really disappointed if I hadn't have learned how to make all the mistakes ahead of time on myself. So I would say probably the best thing I ever did is publish that book of my own to start out with. And I was listening to a podcast when I was coming home from Chicago this weekend, and there was a line by Rilke called "We live our lives in widening circles." And even if you don't read past that first line, I think that relates to almost everything I'm going to tell you about, is that this whole idea of ripples and things that you've done, like some of the jobs I was jumping around from were, I was a trainer at a telemarketing company on how to, get all you people to say yes. We'd work really hard on coming up with transitions and ideas and ways to talk to people. But on the other hand, I look at that now and I think, that was one of those little ripples, one of those little circles along the way that a lot of publishers or entrepreneurs I meet now are very nervous about asking for sales and asking for money and sort of exploring how their business can succeed. There's a lot of theoretical things that you do, but along the way, at some point, you have to ask people if they're interested in what you're selling or if there's a reason why they don't, they're not interested. And so in some ways, having done multiple sales jobs prior to 1991 and even into the 90s, the simple question, is there a particular reason why you're not interested, is a surprisingly valuable question to almost anybody. Because if you don't find out what people want, then you can never help them. You're sort of living in a vacuum. And so I just say that because I've, you hear a lot about your past jobs and your past experiences. I never thought I would leave this customer service job at this cable company in Lawrence. Like, I thought the rest of my life was going to be just sort of the drudgery of that. But when I left, and now when I look back on the skills that I got from that, I realized they really have helped me a lot. Let me think. As you can tell, I don't do a lot of notes ahead of time. If anyone ever has any questions, though, definitely just raise your hand or type them out, because I like knowing I'm talking about things that people really want to know. The other question I get asked a lot, though, in case you're thinking of a question, I might have ESP. The main thing is, how do I pick what I pick? So I think I'm rounding out on about 300 books now. And I'd like to tell everyone that I picked that I have a really narrow guideline to use for what I pick. My mission statement, since we all have to have mission statements at this point in our lives, and mine's so quick, I can do it between, hit the elevator button and it'll be done by the time you get to the second floor. Mine is just using the literary arts to better understand how we can best live in the Midwest. And that takes any form, it turns out. I've done poetry, graphic novels, essays, picture books, screenplays, anything. I started out really only being interested in the environment and the natural world. And I kind of thought that would guide me through for a long time, but you realize that your interests change over time. And that sort of thing just wasn't as exciting to me as it had been. I think I heard Greg Brown once, the folk singer. He started Red House Records, and he had mentioned in an interview, how do you pick the musicians that you release? And his answer was essentially, I just trust what I like. And although, a lot of answers in life come as kind of those little Zen moments, right? To say you trust what you like is far too obvious to do. But on the other hand, it's exactly what you need to do. I have learned to trust the things that I'm curious about and the things that I'm interested in. I mean, Tom Cook's Club Foot book is a pretty good example on how I come about picking something. I was aware of Dr. Ponseti, but not, I was no expert at him. And I think the main thing I knew is that there was on a Fry Fest, they'd had a Ponseti races, which is not really the best thing to know him for, because it's really, not the point of it. But I was vaguely aware of Ponseti. And when Tom submitted the book idea to me, it sort of dawns on you like, wow, there's a lot to know here. And at the same time, I think of myself as at least of average intelligence. So, I mean, when something comes into me, I think to myself, I'm almost the perfect person to do this book, because I'm sitting there thinking, probably asking Tom the most obvious questions ever, because I'm sort of learning about it while I'm reading his book. And so that's what I mean by taking something on that piques my curiosity. And that was just, I wanted to know more about that topic. And I was lucky that Tom was already a good author, already had it. I think I asked him if he had any cover ideas, and he just pulled something out of his backpack and said, I've got one. And I looked, wait, it looks like you're well on your way. And so that doesn't happen very often, but as an entrepreneur, single person business, you really need to pick your people well also, because you spend a lot of time working with people one-on-one or via Zooms or emails, and you sort of dedicate a year of your life to creating a project with them. And I have not taken some projects on simply because it was clear that the author and myself were just not going to be able to work together. And I think on the outside, that sort of seems like you're throwing money away. But I've never regretted not choosing anyone that I didn't choose. And that's always hard. And another one of those Zen things that I've learned along the way. And about 2001 or two, I finally ended up being a full-time book publisher. And this, I think, goes for anyone doing any business. But in my particular case, what I've learned, and I think is the most important thing I've learned, is that you have people that care about their life, about their families and their health, their jobs. And then right in there at number 4 or 3, or really high on the list, is this project that you find the time to invest your life into. I mean, you write a novel, or you write a collection of poetry, or you put together a graphic novel. And it's obvious to me that I didn't respect that time commitment and that sort of passion and dream that someone has early on, like I should have. I feel incredibly honored that people trust me with their book submissions, because I understand how important it is to them. It's their chance to share their best ideas. And that's not to say that I'm good at treating everyone perfectly, because obviously I'm not. I mean, I'd be spending the rest of my life reading submissions from people. But there is that underlying sense that I have, that I do need to recognize that that books are not going away. And people put a lot of time and energy into creating this thing, into these books. And I think anytime you help anybody in any business or organization, that on the one hand, it's obvious to say to yourself they care about it, but really they do care about it. And I try and respect people that way as much as I can. And that makes choosing the books that I choose even more heartfelt. I mean, if I'm at a book show and I have all the books lined up, it's, if someone says, "What's your favorite book?" I mean, I could go on and on about each and every author. I've learned to admire what authors do way more than I used to when I just read books. Their commitment to what they've written and what they've shared, and how many times they'll put up with me asking them to edit something, and their covers, and how it just goes on. I just think that's a really important thing for me to say out loud anyway, is that I've really been blessed to work with a lot of people that know what they're doing. And not to mention, I've been lucky to live in an area like Johnson County, where there's no such thing as succeeding in a vacuum on your own. I mean, it's the support of people that I live with, literally, that help me keep going. So all of you, I recognize a fair number of the names on here, and I've had been lucky to be in the right place at the right time and provide something that people really seem to appreciate. I got the Iowa Community Cultural Corridor Award a couple years ago. And you're standing up there and you realize the only reason I could ever have gotten an award like this is because I'm surrounded by people that make it possible. And Rotary definitely goes a long way towards making that happen. Well, there's no questions. I'll keep going. But...
Yeah, Steve, we have a few questions in the chat.
Oh, good.
Linda Kerber says, your books are very well designed. How did you learn to do that, or find designers to help?
That's a good question. I mean, I frequently have explained that without a degree in writing, design, marketing, computer use, editing, or anything, I've managed to make it work. I do most of the covers on my own, but that's not really true because there's a certain things like I'm surprised how many, I'm going to get to the answer to the question, I promise. But it's amazing how one of the things people appreciate about the way I work, about I do books is that I take feedback from authors and I read the book and I ask them questions like, is this image that I read about, is this something that you own or is this something that you have? And I also will ask authors frequently if there's books that they really admire or books that they like the design of. Because in the end, I always tell myself, it's not my name on the cover, it's their name on the cover. And so they have to be satisfied with what's there. And so it's kind of, the design kind of comes through the author's wishes and what they say. And I interpret the moments in books that seem to stand out the most. And then we find a way to make those shine. And certainly I've had other people do covers for me. And I definitely am not a professional book designer, but I'm glad that Linda thinks they look really nice because I try my hardest to make them turn out that way. And there's just little things like, I started out saying a publisher is a behind the scenes person. A lot of the times, like the inside of a book, if you ever notice the inside of a book, then you kind of messed it up because the point is you're reading it and that you don't want the design itself to be the thing that you're paying attention to. And so there's just little things like if the book is written about a certain period in time, you can figure out a type style that matches that. And it kind of adds to the balance. But again, that's an invisible thing. And you think that, and the design is inherently helpful. And this may just be a great answer for Linda. I don't know. I got pretty deep all of a sudden.
Yeah, Steve, another question we had, can you talk a bit about your most popular books in terms of sales and book reviews?
Sure. I never talk about sale numbers, but that's fine. If I ever have a million bestseller, you'll know I'm a millionaire. Actually, if I sold 1 million copies of something, I might go out of business. But I've been lucky on sales. I did this Kurt Freeze. I don't know, most of us probably remember him in the Devotee restaurant. I did that, A Cook's Journey, Slow Food in the Heartland. That was remarkably well read. Almost every food co-op and every specialty grocery store in the Midwest just loved that book. And for good reason. It shared people's stories with food and it also gave you great recipes. I did I'll just go over like 4 or 5 that stand out. And every book is done exactly what it was meant to do in its own way, which sounds kind of crazy out loud, but you realize that a poetry book is not going to sell thousands and thousands of copies. And so you have different expectations for it. I did this one on there was a murder. Why can't I think of their name? The murder in Waterloo, the Marks murders in 1970, I think 78 or 79, and people just loved that because it's not a whodunit, it's a whydunit. And the author had been friends with Jerry Mark, who's, as far as I know, still in the Fort Madison Penitentiary. And it's a captivating book because why does someone behave like that? The graphic novel I did this year on Spirit Lake has just been selling out and selling out and selling out. People just really are attracted to learning history through graphic novels. And that was a sort of a risk for me in some ways because I hadn't done a graphic novel before. And as trivial as it seems, that's the kind of thing that you just learn to develop over time. And it seems like a small development on the course of a business, but I just didn't know if I should try that, and I did, and now I'm doing another one by him, entitled Bach and the Blues, which is about Pablo Casal and blues singer Robert Johnson, who shared a lot of the same. Well, there was the Spanish Revolution for Casal and the rise of and the German, all the German issues, and then there's racism and segregation in the South for Robert Johnson, and they both recorded their best albums or records the same week of the same year, and that's kind of where I go when I say things that interest you are what you trust, and that obviously has not much to do with the Midwest, but on the other hand, completely fascinating book coming out. And I don't know, those are, I have this Iowa history book told in kind of a Ken Burns style called Iowa, I think it's just called the Iowa Collection. And it's letters and just indirect history sources over time, memoirs and diaries of people since the Iowa became a state, and a little before, and then all the way through. A taxi cab driver writing about his vision of Iowa in the early 2000s. And I think that's kind of some of them anyway.
Yeah, Steve, another question we had. A lot of books are printed overseas now. Is the current supply chain disruption changing production?
Yes. It is. It's actually if I say I'd have to, if you don't keep up with what's happening, you'll go out of business. This is a really hard time to be a book publisher right now. I actually don't print overseas for various social reasons, but I do things in Canada. It doesn't seem possible, but yet there's a shortage of paper. Like right now, I can't get something printed in a natural paper, and I can't get something printed on a 70 weight paper, which those details don't matter. And the normal printer I use right now, I checked with them because I'm doing a reprint right now of the graphic novel, The Moon and the Snowblind. And I put that order in last September, and I'm just getting it at the beginning of next week. And then I have another book in the fall coming out, and they're already booked through the whole year because they just don't have enough paper to print any more than they're printing. And so it's going to send me scurrying around looking for places that have, depending on what kind of paper they have and what their print schedules are. And it's going to, like everything, I mean, the paper prices have gone up. But the main thing is just coordinating everything, because now you got to get your files in earlier to get a book out later. And I don't really know if that answers the question in an everyday way of answering it. But yes, there are like real things going on with paper supplies and book production, just like every other business probably. I was watching the news and their bakery, they couldn't get enough cream cheese to make their signature icing. And you just think, man, there's a lot of unexpected consequences that that you hadn't thought of ahead of time.
Great. And Chuck Swanson, Chuck, you have a question?
Yeah, Steve, what a great program. Thank you so much for today. I work at Hansher, and we've published a couple books, and it's a real art. It's a very complicated process. And my question is, have you ever thought, or maybe you've done this, like the Iowa Youth Writing Project, have you ever talked to young writers about this process and what it takes to be a publisher?
Well, not directly. I mean, the Midwest Writing Center they had the Collins, they still have the Collins Writing Festival. And there was one time I went in for a week and talked to high schoolers kind of about the process of publishing. And I was kind of surprised that there was that many people that just really wanted to know about how a book's created. And I mean, you realize that books, like, to my mind, like, books aren't going anywhere. I mean, we are addicted to stories. And so, and if you hear someone on NPR, it's like they don't say person that thought about something. They say person, new author or author of such and such. And so, I mean, the need for people to consider writing and publishing as a future is definitely real. Ebooks may be be what's happening next. But I'm not totally into that. I think a lot of people have screen fatigue. I know my own daughter and her boyfriend are just like, we don't want to look at another screen. We want to have the book in our hands. And I mean, people always say, how do you make it as a publisher? I'm like, because I don't have any, there's no one else publishing. So like, all of you guys don't bother with it. It's not a good idea. But I mean, I agree with you. I know someone just commented quick that the university has a publishing track, and that's pretty good. I've had some of those for interns, and they're pretty interested in seeing it through. I think some of the hardest thing to do though is I think the hardest lesson in all of that is that, like any job, you sort of always jump to the end point instead of the process along the way. And so I think if you're not making a ton of money when you first do your first book, I always tell people, like, I didn't commit to full time being a book publisher for like the first 12 years. And I'm lucky that it happened that fast. I mean, but I also, and it's a little selfish, I've done events where I say, hi, my name's Steve. I make my living through being a book publisher. And I'm not trying to show off. I just know from the point of view of a parent and as a young person, you need to know that everything is possible. It doesn't mean it's just going to be handed to you, but I mean, it's an option. I think it was Paul Gruco, this author of Minnesota, wrote, it's Grassroots, how he was really surprised to discover at a young age that there were living authors near him. And he just hadn't thought of that. And I think that's kind of sad and mind-opening all at the same time, that, you know, these are possibilities for people to do, whether it's publishing and writing or whatever dream you kind of have. And it doesn't happen alone either. So yeah, if anyone wants to take over a press someday, I haven't thought about that yet. So I need some young person to come on. Thanks for that question. That's a good question.
Yep. Steve, another question we had in chat. What are you doing with your backlist copies of books?
If you didn't have Backlist, you wouldn't be in business anymore as a publisher. I keep looking for ways to promote those. You know, in the news, if you see something, I have this, Dave Bluter wrote one on sports gambling. Anytime that issue comes up, I mean, I don't know that social media, it's not the answer to everything, even though it feels like it on the outside. But, you know, if you can hashtag that, or if you discover another book coming out that's similar to what you do, then you can promote that. There's a woman that wrote a book on Grant Wood 2 years ago, and then another one on Jay Sigmund, who is friends with Grant Wood in Wabeek, Iowa. And she's now doing these Zoom conferences about studying Grant Wood. And so it's to my and her advantage that everyone wants to know about the books that she's already written. So all the glamour comes in the first year when a book comes out, but you just don't forget about them.
And Steve, the final question we had in chat is kind of looking at your screen and your background. You're surrounded by books. What a great life you have. More of a comment.
Well, thank you. I think I've seen a few people in the background with more books than me, but I do have a lot sitting around because I have a partial warehouse here too for sending out orders. So I think I was telling you or someone at the beginning, like, you know, I probably have like 4,000 or 5,000 books sitting around here, and it's pretty hands-on too. I mean, I'm getting the reprint for the graphic novel on early next week, and the semi truck just comes to the house, and I have them roll them into the garage, and then I send them out and pack them and do whatever all the orders are there. But you know, doing everything fits me pretty well. I'm pretty motivated.
Great. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time and your presentation today. It's really exciting for us as Rotarians to hear about the partnership you had with Tom Cook to kind of share the Ponseti method with the rest of the world. And Steve, right, in honor of our speakers every week, we make a donation to the Rotary Polio Plus program. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation matches that 2-to-1. And that'll result in 70 polio vaccinations around the world in your honor. So thank you again for spending some time with us today.
hey, if I could talk for 2 more hours and you could double it, that'd be perfect. So
Yes.
that's a great cause. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again,
All right,
Steve.
thanks for your time, everybody. I enjoy sharing all this.
Final reminders to everyone. Always want to let people know who our program is the following week. So next Thursday, we are going to have a program from Pat Airy. Pat is the CEO of Goodwill Industries of the Heartland. That should be an interesting program. So to make sure to join us next Thursday at noon. And we conclude each and every one of our meetings with the Rotary four-way test. And we'll share that on a screen in a second. And if everyone could please unmute yourself and join me in our Rotary four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth?
The truth?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Will it build goodwill and
better
friendships?
Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Great to see everyone and hope everyone has a wonderful week. We'll see you next Thursday.
Bye-bye.